The night was still, yet something sacred stirred in the spirit realm. You could almost feel it in the air, like a whisper just beyond the reach of hearing. Heaven wasn't quiet. Heaven was moving, and Archangel Michael, heaven's appointed warrior and messenger, was already walking toward you in a vision, holding a scroll etched with fire. The seal of the living God was upon it, and he was on assignment. You've been praying, haven't you? Asking questions in secret, whispering things like, "Lord, is there someone you're preparing for me? Am I meant to wait longer? Is there still hope for love that's pure, holy, and divine?" Heaven heard. And the answer has already been written days ago, maybe even before you were born. Now, that answer is being delivered, not in ink, but in revelation. Michael didn't come with thunder this time. No clashing swords, just quiet assurance. A presence that shakes the bones yet fills the soul with peace. He's been watching, guarding this holy union that was destined before the foundations of the earth. A marriage that isn't just for companionship, but for purpose, for destiny, for kingdom advancement. You've been feeling it lately, haven't you? That unusual pull in your spirit. The dreams that don't make sense. The moments when you hear a name in your heart and dismiss it, thinking, that can't be it. That's not who I pictured. But heaven's narrative doesn't follow your preferences, it follows alignment. It follows promise. Michael stood with clarity in his eyes, and when he opened the scroll, the light that burst forth filled the entire space. He wasn't just holding a name. He was revealing a covenant, something that had been sealed long before. Your heartbreaks, disappointments, and seasons of silence. The name, yes, it's coming, but don't rush past the preparation. Heaven never moves in panic. It moves in divine timing. And you've been purified in the fire. You've been misunderstood, set apart, and even rejected, but not forgotten. No, heaven never forgets a soul that's been marked by destiny. This marriage isn't ordinary. It isn't coming just to fill emotional gaps or tick off boxes on a life checklist. It's sacred, the kind of union that makes demons tremble. The kind that unlocks generational blessings. And that's why the warfare around your relationships has been so intense. The enemy isn't attacking your loneliness. He's attacking your legacy. Michael looked straight at you, not with human affection, but with divine urgency. "Tell them," he said, "that the waiting has not been wasted. Tell them that heaven has chosen and the time is near. But they must be alert. They must see the name quickly. Because when heaven opens the window, the moment must be seized. You're being drawn to places, names, even faces that seem insignificant at first glance. But trust this, God hides glory in the ordinary. What you think is coincidence might be the very doorway to covenant. Someone has been praying for you, day and night. Without even knowing your name, they've carried you in the spirit. Their prayers have built a canopy around your future. They've wept over a person they've never met, trusting that God would bring you in His time. And now that time is unfolding. You've had moments where you felt the brush of something eternal in simple interactions, a conversation that lingered longer than it should, a glance that carried something more than attraction, a presence that felt strangely familiar, as though your soul remembered theirs. Don't ignore these nudges. Michael is releasing clarity in this hour. Where confusion once reigned, peace will now settle. Where your heart once trembled with uncertainty, it will now stand firm in discernment. Because you're not called to guess, you're called to know. And here's the part you weren't expecting. The name you're about to see may not fit your list. It may not match the image you've carried in your mind, but it will match your spirit. Because this name was chosen not for compatibility alone, but for calling. And when your calling aligns with someone else's, you don't just fall in love, you walk in purpose. Michael is speaking to your heart now, quietly, urgently. Do not delay when the name is revealed, he says. Do not let fear talk you out of it. This is the one heaven has appointed. This is the one who has been through fire like you. The one whose scars mirror your own. The one who understands the language of your silence. And yes, you'll know you won't need 100 confirmations. Though some may come, you'll sense it deep in your belly, a quiet agreement, a spiritual recognition. The peace that passes all understanding will rest on you like a mantle. You're about to step into a season where God's timing and your readiness collide. And when they do, the name will come. You might see it in a dream. You might hear it whispered in prayer. You might come across it in the most random of places. But your spirit will leap, because this name isn't just a name. It's a key, a door, a divine marker in your story. A sign that the holy marriage ordained in heaven is now being brought to earth. Don't dismiss what seems too soon. Don't overthink what feels too simple. The enemy wants you distracted, but Michael is calling you to attention. Look, he says, look again. The name is closer than you think, and it carries more weight than you can imagine. You didn't realize it at first, but something inside you started shifting after that divine encounter. You began waking up differently. The mornings felt heavier with purpose. Even your prayers took on a sharper tone, less of begging, more of aligning. It was as if your spirit had already seen what your mind was still catching up to. Heaven had issued a notice, and whether you were ready or not, a holy union was drawing near. The days that followed weren't loud with signs, but they were rich with whispers. The kind of nudges you almost overlook. A name popped up twice in a single day. A conversation with a stranger brought up something eerily familiar. You began to feel like someone, somewhere, was reaching out, not physically, but spiritually. And your heart? It responded. It tightened in curiosity, then loosened in peace. The kind of peace that doesn't make sense unless it's divine. Archangel Michael hadn't left. He doesn't leave until the assignment is complete. You could feel his presence hovering, protective, watchful. Not like a hovering cloud, but like a silent general overseeing a sacred battlefield. Because make no mistake, what's being arranged in heaven isn't going to come without resistance. The enemy hates holy marriages, not because of romance, but because of the power they release. Two people united in God's will, praying together, building together, moving in sync, create ripples that dismantle strongholds. That's why the delays have been long. That's why the counterfeits came with smiles and charm. That's why your heart was broken more than once. But none of it was wasted. Every wound taught you what covenant should never feel like. Every silence prepared your ears to hear God more clearly. Michael's message grew clearer with every passing moment. You're not just falling in love, you're stepping into prophecy. So when that name resurfaces, on a phone screen, in a text, in a random post, don't brush it off. Pause. Pray. Test the spirit, yes, but also listen with your heart. This person may already be within reach. They may be someone you never considered, or someone you used to know, now transformed. But their timing, their growth, their readiness, it all had to line up with yours. Heaven works in alignment, not coincidence. You've wondered how you'll know. What if you miss it? What if you choose wrong? But here's the truth. You won't have to chase clarity when it's from God. Peace will chase you. And this person, when they come, will carry a frequency your soul already knows. Not perfect, but pure. Not flawless, but surrendered. And yes, they've been waiting too. You're not the only one who's been fighting battles in silence. They've had to let go of distractions, of half-hearted connections, of their own plans. They've walked through their own fires to arrive at this moment, and heaven is preparing to let your journeys collide. Michael stood again, this time beside a golden mirror, not one that shows your face, but one that shows your purpose. And reflected in that purpose was the silhouette of another, not blurry, not shadowy, clear, whole, ready. You could feel heaven's joy rising. Angels don't just fight, they celebrate, and they've been holding their breath for this moment. Not because marriage is the end goal, but because your union will unlock new chapters for generations. Children will be born under divine covering. Ministries will be birthed from your unity. Lands will be claimed. Prayers will be answered, not just yours, but those of your ancestors. Yes, this is bigger than you. That's why you've been under pressure, because diamonds don't form in comfort, because oil doesn't flow without crushing. Your obedience in the secret place, your surrender when no one was watching, that's what qualified you. Heaven didn't need you perfect. Heaven needed you yielded. Michael unrolled the scroll again, and this time you saw your name written in flames. Next to it was another name, glowing in gold. The names were linked, not by ink, but by fire. Covenant fire, unbreakable, eternal. The kind of seal only God can ordain. And just as your eyes tried to focus on the second name, Michael whispered, "It's time." You felt it in your bones, the shift, the spiritual exhale. The waiting was not forever. Heaven was about to interrupt your ordinary. You'll know them by the peace they carry, by the way your spirit calms in their presence, by how your purpose sharpens when they speak. They'll challenge your fears but guard your heart. They'll love God more than they love you, and that's how you'll know it's safe. You may feel fear, that's okay. Even divine things can scare the flesh. But don't let that fear make you delay. When the name comes, when the opportunity to connect arises, respond. Heaven doesn't wait forever. Timing is sacred. Michael isn't just announcing a marriage. He's calling forth obedience. Because to receive what's holy, you must walk in holiness. This union isn't for everyone. It's for the set apart. For the ones who stayed pure in their intentions, for the ones who forgave when it hurt, for the ones who stayed faithful even when hope felt silent. You are seen, you are chosen. And this marriage isn't just for your joy, it's for His glory. Michael steps back, and for a moment, everything feels still again. But it's not stillness, it's silence before the sound, the kind of quiet just before heaven sings. The stillness didn't last long. It never does when something sacred is about to break through. You began sensing the movement even before anything changed in the natural. The air felt heavier with expectation, and your spirit stayed on edge, not in fear, but in readiness. That name, it was circling you now. It wasn't a stranger, it was destiny getting closer, faster, clearer, and yet the distractions grew louder. The very day you felt closer to the answer, people from your past tried to resurface. Offers came that looked good but felt hollow. Familiar voices began suggesting old paths. The enemy never just sits back when God is about to shift your story. He floods you with noise, hoping you'll miss the whisper. But you've come too far to fall for that now. Michael had not moved far. He remained stationed, watchful like a guardian who refuses to blink. Heaven had already declared its intent, but you still had to choose. Divine timing doesn't override human will. God won't force your yes, even when it's for your good. And that's why the enemy works overtime in moments like this. Because he knows one delayed response, one misplaced fear, one act of disobedience can derail a holy union for years. That's why you had to grow. That's why the seasons of pruning hurt so deeply. Because what you're about to carry with this person, this divine partner, requires maturity, not just emotion. It requires spiritual wisdom, not just romantic chemistry. And now, finally, you're there. You've begun to feel it, even in your sleep. Dreams that feel like previews, faces blurred but emotions sharp. Conversations that feel like déjà vu. It's because heaven is trying to prepare you for a moment that must be recognized in the blink of an eye. The name. It's almost time. But before it's revealed, Michael speaks one more thing. His voice doesn't shake the earth, it steadies. Your soul, look inward, he says. Are you ready to be who they need? That question hits differently, because this isn't just about what you're waiting for. It's about who you're becoming. You're not being paired with someone because you're lonely. You're being assigned to someone because you're ready to carry weight with them, to build, to fight, to rise. This holy marriage is heaven's solution to a problem in the earth. Together, you and this person will shift atmospheres. The moment you unite, doors will open that were once sealed, curses will break. Generational patterns will reverse. It's not hype, it's strategy, divine strategy. You remember now the times you almost gave up, the seasons you thought God had forgotten you, but those very tears watered the ground where this covenant is about to bloom. Nothing was lost. Everything was used, and they've been through the same. Right now, somewhere in the world, this person is preparing too. They're feeling the same divine tension, the same spiritual throb that says, something's coming. They're waking up praying for clarity, for timing, for strength. They may not know your face, but they're covering you anyway. This is what heaven does. It brings together those who have been forged in fire and places them side by side to walk as one. Michael unrolls the scroll again, slower this time. You don't strain to see it, you just wait. And then as it begins to shimmer, the name. It's not a dramatic shout, it's not a blast of thunder. It's a whisper in your spirit that you know didn't come from your imagination. A name, or maybe just an initial. Maybe it's a voice you haven't heard in years or one you're about to hear tomorrow. But when it comes, your spirit will say, that's it. Don't panic when it surprises you. Heaven rarely picks the person we expect. God doesn't match us based on our surface, but on our substance. This name might carry baggage, a past, scars, but it also carries oil. Don't dismiss it because it looks too simple. Don't ignore it because it challenges your comfort zone. This name is a doorway. One touch of obedience and everything shifts. Michael speaks again. They are waiting. Go. And suddenly your excuses feel too small. The fears that once paralyzed. You shrink under the weight of revelation. Because love is no longer about finding someone who fits your fantasy. It's about stepping into a reality that has already been written by the hand of God. You'll recognize the moment, because peace will anchor you. The person may not say much, but their presence will make the noise in your soul go quiet. They may not fit your vision board, but they'll fit your calling. And when your eyes meet, either across a room or across a screen, your spirit will say what words never could. I know you. I've been praying for you. Michael doesn't linger now. His mission is shifting. You are no longer in the season of asking, you're in the season of acting. The name is known, the path is clear. You just need to walk it. Heaven is planning a wedding, and your obedience is the RSVP. You always thought the moment would come with fireworks, some dramatic sign that would leave you breathless. But what you're realizing now is that divine things rarely scream, they settle. Quietly, powerfully, like a river that doesn't need to shout to change the shape of stone. And that's how this name, this person, has begun to echo in your life. Not like a loud interruption, but like a steady rhythm, a beat your soul already knew how to dance to. Michael never promised ease, he promised clarity. And clarity is what you've been given. Now things are beginning to line up. Conversations that used to confuse you suddenly make sense. Patterns that seemed random are now pointing in one direction. Your heart doesn't feel desperate anymore, it feels alert, awake. There's a grace over your thoughts, over your steps, and even over your memories. What used to sting now feels like preparation. What used to make you bitter now makes you grateful, and you begin to sense something deeper. This marriage is not just about companionship, it's about commission. The person God is bringing to you isn't just a partner. They're a co-laborer in the spirit, someone who will help you carry what you've been assigned to do on this earth. Not someone who competes with your calling or confuses your peace, but someone who clarifies it. Someone who will look at your vision and say, "Let's build." You won't have to convince them of your worth. You won't have to hide your wounds or pretend you're stronger than you are. They'll see you and choose you fully, just as you'll see them, not for what they can do, but for who they are becoming. You'll recognize them not by perfection, but by peace. And not the fleeting kind, the peace that settles deep in your spirit, where God speaks the loudest. Michael reminds you now, there will still be warfare. Because anytime God sends something sacred, the enemy sends something counterfeit. And sometimes the counterfeit looks a lot like the real thing, until you test the fruit. So you must stay discerning, stay anchored, stay submitted. This isn't the season to be led by emotions. It's the season to be led by the Spirit. The person God is sending will not pull you out of your purpose. They'll push you deeper into it. They won't be a distraction. They'll be a divine disruption. The kind that clears away confusion and confirms what God already whispered to your soul. Yes, the name is coming, but even before it does, heaven is checking your posture. Are you still holding on to someone God told you to release? Are you still comparing your timeline to someone else's? Are you waiting on a name but resisting the healing required to receive them? This union is holy, and holy things can't rest in unclean spaces. So, let Him finish the work in you. Let Him purify your motives. Let Him sanctify your expectations, because the one He's sending deserves the healed version of you, and you deserve the same in return. Michael doesn't move now. He watches. Not because he doubts you, but because he knows what's at stake. He's seen too many destinies forfeited at the edge of breakthrough. He's guarded too many hearts that quit one prayer too soon. But that won't be you. You've been tested too deeply to throw it away now. You've been trusted with too much to settle. You've wept, worshipped, and waited. And heaven doesn't ignore that kind of faithfulness. Even now, angels are being dispatched. Doors are swinging open in the Spirit. Hearts are being softened. Divine connections are being ignited. The path is being cleared for you and this person to meet, not just in the flesh, but in the fullness of God's will. You may not recognize the exact moment it happens. You may not even believe it at first, but the Spirit within you will rise like fire when the time is right, and Michael will confirm it, not with thunder, but with peace. You don't have to chase what's holy. You don't have to beg God for what He already plans to give. All you have to do now is stay in position, and when the name comes, when the call is made, the door opens, the connection happens, step in boldly, speak with courage, love with wisdom, move with faith, because what you're stepping into isn't just a relationship, it's prophecy fulfilled. The shift in your spirit was undeniable now. You weren't just hoping anymore, you were expecting, and that difference mattered. Hope wonders if something will happen. Expectation knows it will. And you had crossed that invisible line where doubt couldn't dwell anymore. You were walking like someone who knew something sacred was unfolding behind the scenes, and it was. Somewhere out there, that person, the name Heaven showed you in glimpses, was wrestling with the same stirring. They were praying for direction, sensing the same divine urgency, hearing whispers in quiet moments that didn't quite make sense yet, but they felt it in their bones. God was doing something. Michael hadn't left your side, but he had grown quieter. His presence now was more like a silent nod than a booming declaration. Heaven doesn't repeat what it's already confirmed. Once the word is spoken, it's up to you to steward it, to walk it out with trust and obedience. And so you began to move differently. You no longer entertained conversations that felt spiritually misaligned. You didn't linger in environments that clouded your discernment. You stopped explaining yourself to people who couldn't see the calling on your life. You weren't being rude. You were being set apart. Every yes now carried weight. Every no became a form of worship. Because you were guarding something holy, something that could not be delayed by compromise or watered down by convenience. This union, this heavenly marriage, was about more than your heart. It was about legacy. The person God was aligning with you wasn't just someone to love. They were someone to build with. Together your voices would echo louder. Your prayers would break deeper. Your presence together would draw others closer to God. It wasn't about flashy photos or viral stories. It was about covenant, an agreement written in heaven and now waiting to be fulfilled on earth. And even when fear tried to creep back in, even when the old voices whispered lies like, "You're not ready," or "It's too late," or "You've missed it," you silenced them with truth, because heaven doesn't operate on your timeline. It operates on divine alignment. Michael reminded you gently, delay is not denial. The wait was warfare. Every unanswered prayer wasn't ignored. It was preparing the atmosphere. Every moment of silence wasn't punishment. It was protection. God wasn't withholding. He was orchestrating. You were never being punished. You were being positioned. And now, the name was growing louder in your spirit. You started seeing it in unexpected places, on billboards, in random texts, in songs you hadn't heard in years. And every time it showed up, your spirit stirred, not with anxiety, but with assurance. Because when God wants you to see something, He doesn't just put it in front of your eyes. He awakens it in your spirit. The world will call it coincidence. You'll know it's confirmation. You're not crazy for believing. You're not naive for holding on. You're prophetic. You've discerned something others can't see yet, and that's okay, because this word wasn't for the crowd. It was for you. Michael watches still. Not because he doubts your steps, but because the moment is near. So near now you can feel the weight of it in your chest. Like standing at the edge of something sacred, and knowing all you have to do is step forward. There won't be flashing lights. There won't be a booming voice from the sky, but there will be a stillness that settles over you when you meet them. This person, the one you've been prepared for, is not coming to fix you. They're coming to walk with you. Not ahead, not behind, beside. You'll notice their presence doesn't compete with your peace. Their love won't feel rushed or chaotic or hard to hold on to. It will feel like breathing again after holding your breath for far too long. You'll see them, really see them. And something in your soul will whisper, this is what heaven had in mind. Time didn't feel as heavy anymore. You weren't watching the clock, you were watching the spirit. Every moment had a rhythm now, a divine cadence. And even in the silence, you could sense the acceleration. What used to feel distant was now within reach, not because anything had changed outwardly, but because you had changed inwardly. You weren't chasing the blessing anymore. You were walking in alignment with it. This is what Archangel Michael had been preparing you for, not just the promise, but the maturity to handle it. You weren't just praying for a holy marriage. You were becoming the kind of person who could steward one. And in the spiritual realm, becoming always precedes receiving. There were no shortcuts, no detours, just obedience, just surrender. And the surrender had carved out space in you for something sacred to rest. It hadn't been easy. You'd had to let go of people who once felt like forever. You'd had to forgive things that never got an apology. You'd had to bury versions of yourself that couldn't survive where God was taking you. But every tear you cried in the dark was seen. Every yes when you wanted to say no was recorded. Every step forward, even when your legs were shaking, was counted as faith. And now the name that heaven whispered is becoming louder, clearer. You don't just hear it, you feel it. It's in the way your spirit reacts to certain places, certain conversations, certain nudges that don't make sense to your mind, but feel perfectly natural to your soul. You aren't looking for signs anymore. You are the sign. Your peace is the evidence, your clarity is the confirmation, and your readiness is heaven's signal that it's time. Archangel Michael, still standing guard, knows this moment is sacred. The final touches are being made, not in the person but in the timing. You see, even divine unions require earthly coordination. There are people being moved, rooms being prepared, opportunities being aligned, so that when you and this person meet, it won't just be love, it will be destiny. It won't be random, it won't be rushed, it will be right. And when it happens, it won't feel like something brand new. It'll feel like a memory you hadn't accessed yet. Like something ancient your soul always knew was coming. There will be laughter, yes, but there will also be depth. Conversations that pull you past the surface, prayer that feels like oxygen, a recognition that isn't based on appearance, but assignment. You'll see God in their eyes, not because they're perfect, but because they're purposed. You won't need to explain the warfare you've been through. They'll have their own scars. You won't have to beg them to understand your calling. They'll have their own fire. And instead of competition, you'll find covenant. Together, you'll build something that shakes atmospheres, a home that hosts God's glory, a love that sets others free simply by existing. But remember this, the promise is beautiful, yes, but it's also weighty, because every holy union attracts both heaven and hell's attention. Don't be surprised when you feel resistance. Don't be shocked if the enemy tries to distract you with imitation connections that look close enough. Too real. Stay anchored, stay discerning. Michael has warned you already. Counterfeits always show up before covenants, and they often look like everything you've prayed for on the surface. But only God knows what's under the wrapping. Test the fruit, trust the Spirit, and never forget, God is not the author of confusion. If it brings chaos, fear, or a loss of peace, it's not from Him. The person heaven is sending won't pressure you into clarity. They'll partner with you toward it. And when the name comes fully, when it no longer shows up in fragments but stands before you in flesh and spirit, don't shrink. Don't second-guess it. Don't sabotage what you've been sanctified for. Lift your head, look them in the eyes, and step into what heaven has written. And then, almost without warning, it began to unfold. Not with a shout, but with a whisper. Not with fireworks, but with peace. A message, a meeting. A moment that didn't feel forced or dramatic. In fact, it felt almost too natural to be supernatural, until your spirit responded in a way your logic couldn't explain. There they were, not perfect, not polished, but familiar in a way that startled your soul. Not because you knew their face, but because your spirit recognized their presence. You'd seen them before, maybe in dreams, maybe in visions, maybe just in the quiet places where God trains your discernment. And now they stood in front of you, carrying the very peace you'd prayed to one day recognize. Archangel Michael's silence spoke volumes. He didn't need to say anything now. His job had never been to make the connection. It was to guard the path that led to it. And now that you'd arrived, the battle had shifted. The warfare that once surrounded your waiting was now surrounding your promise, because holy things are always tested. You watched carefully, not just with your eyes, but with your spirit. You didn't rush to romanticize or overanalyze. You let the moment breathe, you let God speak. And what you found wasn't flashy or overwhelming. It was steady. They listened to you like your words were sacred. They prayed with you like they knew prayer wasn't a formality. It was foundation. They didn't need to impress you. They wanted to understand you. And as you spoke, something inside you began to release. Old defenses, old fears. The walls you'd built out of survival started to lower, not because you felt weak, but because you finally felt safe. That's how you knew, because when something is from God, it won't push you into panic. It won't trigger every trauma you've been healing from. It won't feel like you're constantly trying to prove your worth or earn their attention. It will rest. It will settle. It will build. You started to feel it in your rhythm, how peace lingered longer after talking to them, how you prayed for them without even trying, how your conversations stirred not just feelings, but purpose. And when they said your name, it didn't sound like flattery. It sounded like recognition, because that's what divine unions are. Two people who are assigned to find each other in time after being hidden in God. The delays finally made sense. The heartbreaks became necessary chapters. Even the loneliness served a purpose, because without it you wouldn't have known the difference between being needed and being chosen. Michael had said it before, heaven doesn't rush what it wants to last. And now that you stood at the beginning of something heaven ordained, you understood why the process had taken so long. It wasn't just about you receiving love. It was about you being able to return it, freely, fully, and without fear. That's why God healed your heart before this moment. That's why He pruned your circle, refined your character, and removed everything that distorted your view of what love was supposed to be. Because now you could see clearly, this person, this name heaven gave you, wasn't an answer to loneliness. They were an answer to destiny. You weren't just walking into romance, you were walking into a mission, a partnership, a prophetic alignment that would shift things in the spirit, and you were ready. Not because you had it all together, but because you knew who held it all together. You weren't praying, God, are they the one anymore? You were praying, Lord, teach us how to walk together in step with you. Because love without God, there's just emotion. But love built on God becomes a weapon. And this love, this union, was designed to destroy strongholds, raise generations, and carry glory. You saw it now. With clarity, with reverence, with joy. And as you looked at them, that name, once just a whisper in your spirit, was now a living testimony standing before your eyes. The wait was never in vain. It was the making of a holy marriage. It was never just about meeting them. It was about becoming someone who could keep them, nurture them, and build something with them that would last beyond a lifetime. And now that you stood shoulder to shoulder, you could sense the weight of the calling, resting gently between you. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was real, tangible, sacred. Together you were stepping into something the enemy tried so hard to delay. This wasn't just romance, it was restoration, not just affection, it was assignment. You both knew it, without needing to say much. The Spirit had already said plenty. The conversations weren't surface level anymore. You were building altars, not just making plans. You were praying with your eyes open, watching how God moved between you. There was a quiet urgency in your steps, not because you feared losing one another, but because you knew heaven was backing your every move. Archangel Michael had retreated into the shadows now, not because his role was done, but because the stage was set. He remained close, still warring on your behalf, but now his focus was different, guarding what had finally arrived, not just protecting the weight. Heaven celebrates moments like this, not because of the butterflies, but because of the blueprint, and yours was unfolding perfectly. You began to notice it in the little things, how their peace mirrored yours, how their voice calmed storms you didn't realize were still inside you, how your dreams started to stretch just by being near there. Faith, and they noticed it in you too. You weren't trying to impress, you were just being, and that was more than enough. Your obedience had made you attractive, your prayers had made you powerful, your patience had made you trustworthy. There was no fear in their eyes, no hesitation in their steps, only the same quiet confidence you had come to carry, that this was holy and it was worth protecting. Together you began talking to God differently, not from desperation but from partnership. You weren't just seeking direction, you were asking for strategy, because now it wasn't just about surviving the wait, it was about stewarding the promise. You'd each been prepared in different ways. Your trials didn't look the same, but your triumphs had the same origin, God's grace. And because of that, your hearts knew how to honor one another. You didn't minimize each other's pain. You didn't compete for whose journey was harder. You just understood, deeply, silently, consistently. You saw the cracks in each other and didn't flinch. You heard the stories that shaped each other and chose compassion instead of control. That's how you knew this was real. Because only God can author something this safe. And still, you weren't naive. You knew the enemy would try to interfere. But you were armed differently now. This time, love wouldn't be your weakness. It would be your weapon. Every prayer you prayed together struck the enemy's camp. Every decision you made in unity dismantled old curses. Every time you forgave quickly, refused offense, or chose humility over ego, you built another layer of spiritual armor over your covenant. The battles didn't stop, but your perspective had changed. You weren't fighting for each other. You were fighting with each other. And that made all the difference. You began dreaming together now, not just about wedding colors or venues, but about impact, about ministry, about legacy, about children, who would never have to recover from the trauma you both endured, because they would be born into healing, truth, and glory. The name God whispered to you now had a face, a voice, a heart that beat in rhythm with your own. And when you looked into their eyes, you didn't just see your future. You saw God's faithfulness. You couldn't rush this. You wouldn't want to, because every step you took together was laced with purpose. There was no need to impress the world. You weren't building for Instagram. You were building for eternity. And in that stillness, you whispered your own prayer. One you hadn't said in a long time. God, thank you for not letting me settle, because this was worth every tear, every lonely night, every false start and closed door. This was worth the years you spent feeling unseen, because heaven had always seen you. And now, that heavenly plan was unfolding right before your eyes. One step, one prayer, one sacred yes at a time. The confirmation didn't come in lightning bolts or angelic choirs. It came in consistency, in showing up, in staying through silence, in choosing truth over ego, prayer over pride, and unity over impulse. The real miracle wasn't just that you found each other. The real miracle was that you recognized what you had and honored it. There were moments you both sat in silence, knowing deep down that this wasn't just a relationship, it was a revelation. God was revealing himself through the way you served each other, through the way you forgave without scorekeeping, through the way you told the truth even when it was uncomfortable. Because holy love tells the truth. Holy love is brave. It holds space for growth, without fear of rejection. And every time you let down another layer of armor, you weren't just falling deeper in love. You were falling deeper into freedom. That's what made this different. It didn't suffocate you. It didn't confuse you. It didn't keep you guessing. This love revealed things, healed things, restored things. It made you better, not just as a partner, but as a person, as a believer, as a reflection of Christ. And Michael had never left. He stood at the gate of this covenant, sword drawn, not just watching, but warring. Because now that your connection had been revealed, the real battle had begun. Not to destroy your love, but to distract you from its purpose, to wear you down with pettiness, to make you forget that the war wasn't with each other, but with spiritual forces that feared what you would become together. But you were prepared now. You'd been trained in fire. You'd been refined in wilderness. You had learned the discipline of stillness and the power of obedience. You were no longer shocked by delay or discouraged by testing. You had grown into a spiritual maturity that could carry what you once could only dream of. So when trials came, you didn't flinch, you didn't run, you prayed, you fasted. You covered one another. You interceded like warriors, not warriors. You forgave like Jesus, not like judges. And slowly, The fear that love could be lost started to melt under the weight of God's covenant. This wasn't fragile. This wasn't shallow. This was anchored in something eternal. When you held their hand, it wasn't just romantic, it was prophetic. You could feel the future pulling you forward. You could feel heaven breathing over your yes. You could sense the divine choreography that had gone into this very moment, how every delay was perfectly timed, how every heartbreak served a holy purpose, how every lonely night was never really lonely at all because God had been preparing both of you the entire time. And now you were walking proof of God's patience, of His timing, of His intention, because He didn't just send someone who looked right on paper. He sent someone who fit your calling, someone who didn't just support your dreams, but heard from heaven for you when your faith felt weak. Someone who prayed over you before you even asked. Someone who sought God more than they sought to impress you. You used to pray, "God, just send someone who loves me." Now your prayer had evolved, "God, thank you for sending someone who loves you more than they love me, because that's the only way we'll make it." And deep inside you finally understood what Michael meant when he said to see the name quickly. It was never about rushing into marriage. It was about recognizing God's work before doubt or fear could talk you out of it. Because sometimes heaven speaks in urgency, not to pressure you, but to protect you. Now, that name you once doubted, you say it with reverence. That person you once questioned, you now honor deeply, and that union you once feared wouldn't happen, you now defend like sacred ground, because it is. As everything finally converged, the prayers, the patience, the healing, the truth became undeniable. This wasn't just a relationship. This was a divine covenant, a holy marriage, planned long, before either of you knew what love was supposed to look like. It was written in heaven's scroll, sealed by Archangel Michael's sword, and guarded by God's unwavering faithfulness. You looked back on your journey and saw the fingerprints of God everywhere. Every closed door, every heartbreak, every lonely night. They weren't obstacles but stepping stones leading you to this sacred moment. Now, standing on the edge of forever, you understood why the wait was necessary. You had to be refined in fire, prepared in spirit, and positioned in faith, because what heaven plans cannot be rushed, and what heaven ordains cannot be broken. Archangel Michael's voice echoed softly in your heart. This is not just about finding your spouse. It's about fulfilling your destiny together. You weren't just partners. You were co-laborers in a divine assignment. The love you shared was a weapon against darkness, a testimony of grace, and a beacon of hope to the generations who would follow. You began dreaming boldly again about the legacy you would leave, the families you would impact, and the kingdom work you would carry out as one. You prayed not only for your marriage, but for your joint mission, asking God to empower you both to walk in the fullness of His purpose. No longer were you defined by past pain or fear. You were defined by the promise, a promise kept by God, revealed through the name Michael urged you to see, and lived out in the love you now shared. In the stillness of that sacred union, you whispered a prayer of thanksgiving. Thank you, Lord, for your perfect timing. Thank you for guarding my heart and preparing me for this holy marriage. Help us to walk together in your will, to fight together in your strength, and to love each other as you have loved us. Because this was only the beginning of a story written in heaven, a love that would change lives, and a marriage that would stand strong against every storm. And Archangel Michael, he remained, your silent guardian, watching, protecting, and celebrating the holy marriage that heaven had long planned for you.